part 3. How are you feeling about your painting?
A lot better than last time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Has it been driving you crazy that you haven't been able to work on it and like it's here and you... It's been driving me a little crazy that because I'm not working on mine when you're not here.
Yeah.
It's driving me a little bit crazy. What do you feel like is working well with your painting right now?
Hard to pinpoint. I like the nose a lot better than I did last time. So mainly the nose I like.
Yeah, the nose is working pretty well.
Oh.
Anything you feel like might not be working so well?
Well, maybe could add more shadow right here to do more like what yours looks like.
Okay, I'm glad you identified that. So you're doing very well. You really are. I think I'm concerned that you're getting a little overwhelmed by the small details and you're starting to lose some of the shape, the form. Do you know the difference between micro and macro?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Micro, small, and
Right.
macros.
Yeah. So what I want to encourage you to do is to pull back to the macro a bit. It's your painting has some form, but especially around the sides of the face, it's starting to get a little overly round, overly soft. Starting to lose some of those plane changes of the face, and so I want to help you get back to that. So what we'll do, I've got something to show you that'll help illustrate. What I've been saying the past couple lessons is the way I work in collapsing zones of focus, but I'm not sure just saying that conveys what I mean. So I've got an illustration to show that. What advantage you have is that it's dry to the touch.
Oh.
And see, dry to the touch.
Yeah.
This is where one of my goofy habits of learning how to paint wrong is going to actually come to save the day, because what we'll be able to do, or what you'll be able to do, is to mix up some darker colors and just get a teeny tiny amount of paint on like an old beat up brush and kind of scrub into the dark areas. It'll go on, it's a dry brush technique. It'll go on very thin and you'll be able to see most of what you've already got through that new paint. But by going in and just kind of scrubbing in, reintroducing some of the shadows, you'll get back some of the form. If you don't do that, this will start to get away from you the further down the line you go. And it'll become harder, it'll become more painful to fix. Not harder, because will still come back to just getting back in there and reintroducing the shadows and the form, but you'll have more precious details that you've labored over for longer, and so it'll become emotionally harder to interfere with and be like, oh,
No, I don't want to do this.
Exactly. So this is a great stage to beat it up a little bit before it's gotten too precious. So let's go over the illustration. So here's an illustration of what I mean when I say working in collapsing zones of focus. This is something like what we started out with when we painted, and the very first thing I did and recommended for you last time was to start putting a little bit of black in just the very darkest details. So that's going on there. And then moved up to the next darkest value. And what I did was I just kind of like very liberally added these zones of this next darkest value. And then I went to the next value up. And so if you look carefully, you see these kind of comma shapes in the corners of the eyes that are this value are still there. But I filled in the eye sockets and the shadow under the nose with the next value up. And I also added a little bit of reflection on the neck. And then I went to the next value up and filled in everything else. And this is about as far as I got last time. And so I'm ready to start adding lighter and lighter details. But notice a couple things. Number one, this big area, this big zone of gray in the eye sockets is still the same gray as that. But when this lighter gray is put next to it, it got brighter.
Oh, yeah.
This looks super dark, but it's still the same gray. It's just this creates a contrast. So that's about as far as I got last week. Now what I'm going to start doing this week, and after we get you reestablish the 4-1 yours, what you'll be doing is, so I looked at this medium gray area, and I added the next tone up. I'm looking at this whole zone and asking myself, I'm looking at all the details, but I'm asking myself, is this thing I'm looking at this tone or the next one up? And that creates this form of the next lightest tone. And then within that zone, is what I'm looking at this tone, or is it the next one up? And so you get these smaller zones of value. And then within that smaller zone of value, is it this value, or is it the next one up? And that's what I mean by collapsing zones of focus. And you can just kind of walk it in, zone by zone, bit by bit, until you're adding the final details. Does that make sense now that you see what?
It's a lot more approachable.
Yeah. And so it's a very methodical way of working, and it's a way of wrangling all those seductive and overwhelming details. It's like you just pick a zone, like the eyes, or the shadow under the neck, or the shadow under the nose, and then within that zone, you start moving things around. You start bringing things up, toning things down, and I can keep going further with this. Like I did hardly anything with the neck. There's more changes in there. This was just a demonstration. But that's what I mean when I say working in collapsing zones of focus. It's like I never went back to these dark shapes under the cheeks. But that's not entirely true. I mean, at the very end I did blur the edges of those. Which you can do as you go.
Yeah.
But this is pretty much my working method, and so if you look close, you can see it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges of smaller and smaller zones of just moving one value up each time. So would you be willing to let me paint on your painting just a little bit?
Of course.
So this is a brush I've thoroughly abused. I'm just going to get it a little bit black, but just a little bit. I'm tapping almost everything out of. So just a little bit of black, some yellow ochre, and you can see I'm just tapping out almost everything, so there's hardly any paint in the brush. And then I'm just going to go aggressively into those zones like you saw in the illustration. And just kind of reestablish the eye socket as a massive shape, as a larger zone. But as you can see, you can still see, if you get up close, most of the details that you established with the lighter tones. And so you'll be able to go back and bring them back out but with some reestablished form. And I'm not being all that delicate or careful, as you can see. One of the interesting things I've discovered is with this dry brush technique that I learned mostly by accident, because I'll do this at the end of a painting, the final details too. This dry brush technique with the texture of canvas goes a long way to kind of looking like skin texture, and pores and such. So that's already starting to feel like something that's got serious plane changes going around the corner, you know, shadow cast by the brow and the top lip and under the nose, and so just do some of that for a while. Don't worry about going too dark because we can always make it brighter.
Okay.
In fact, I think I'm going to knock mine down a little bit too. In addition to this dry brush technique that I use a lot, I also start out using a bigger brush than I'm comfortable with, because one, it makes me be more conscious and thoughtful about the marks I make. It also helps keep me from getting too lost in focusing on the small details within details too early. So doing things right in making art is a little bit like figuring out how to play tricks on yourself to get yourself to do it the right way. At least that's what I've found. It's like I know I'm using a brush that's uncomfortably big, and I know it's going to make things that I don't quite like. And that's partly why I did it. Not trying to make the right mark and do it once and move on. It's more like I'm deliberately trying to sneak up on the final result. That may sound like a long way of getting somewhere, and it's perhaps a fair comment, but it's the way I've figured out how to get the results that I want. So, small incremental changes are easier to fix than big bold changes. You want to see my favorite brush of all?
Yes. Really?
Yeah. And it's funny because this is a round, so once upon a time it looked like that.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't a sable type hair like that. This was a bristle, but yeah, it was around, longer and pointed, but so I've abused it and beaten it down to this thing now, but for blending dry without any paint on it, in addition to the dry brush, just almost no paint, I call this my scribbly scrubber. And so I can just take some of that off when it's unloaded with paint. And it's just got these stiff round bristles. So it's almost like an eraser. It's my scribbly scrubber. And I'll just use that all the time. This one's turning into that. That used to be around too. Getting multiple shades of gray with the Naples yellow. It's just Naples yellow, but depending on how thickly or thinly I put it on, I can get 2 and 3 values out of a single color. And this is also what I mean by sneaking up on the details. So I started with the big scruffy brush and kind of scrubbed in the Naples yellow in a very, very thin layer. And I didn't cover everything, I was just creating that next zone of value, like we saw in the illustration. And then on top of that, going in with a smaller, softer brush and adding some more Naples yellow within that zone more selectively and a little more thickly, and so you can get a lot of mileage out of a single color depending on how thinly or thickly you lay it down. Form back, aren't you? How do you feel about it?
Better.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay. Now some people have nice round cheeks like that. I gave you a kind of a sharper one over here, so you probably want to make it either match one or the other. And you are making your painting, so you don't have to do it precisely the way I do. You're not anyway, because even though we're both looking at the same photograph, it doesn't mean we're seeing things in the same way. like you do?
Kind of.
Yeah.
A little bit. I feel like I can't. Do you think it's losing its form again?
I think it's starting to feel a little overworked. Like maybe you're going back and forth, but not quite making progress. So maybe for about 10 or 15 minutes, change the channel and scrub in the color on the background or something. Just kind of give yourself a break from it.
Alright.
Does that sound like an idea?
Mm-hmm.
You know what color you want to use to just rough in the background?
No. Not good.
Not really. Doesn't have to be the final color. It's just something to get in there. It'll feel like progress to fill in that much territory.
I'll leave it up to you. I don't have enough.
Oh, pink it is.
Yay!
One of my favorite browns is Van Dyke. Love a Van Dyke and big fat brush with plenty of thinner on it. I would say plenty, not too much. It could get out of hand, but that was terrible. This was terrible, but in a different way. So yeah, just get this nice and wet. Pick up a bunch of Van Dyke brown. I would say start at near the top and at the corners.
Mm-hmm.
If you start right next to it and you don't like it, well, now you're messing with your image.
Mm-hmm.
You have some space to manage a problem if you start further away. Plus, if you start darker at the corners and it gets lighter as you get towards your image, it starts creating kind of a halo effect.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.